now with their thoughts. Republican commentator Mercedes Schlapp and Fox News contributor Leslie Marshall. I mean, Mercedes, you've advised so many campaigns. Authenticity in a candidate matters. Yes, you have people around you helping you, supporting you, giving you information, helping to back up arguments. But shouldn't you fundamentally sort of be generating some of those lines yourself?
Oh, absolutely. I think what you learn with candidates is that actually sometimes the best lines come from the candidates themselves. But it just shows that for Hillary Clinton, her comfort zone is when she's scripted. It's very clear. I mean, you saw it in the past debates. It is calculated, articulated in a way where she is using the poll-tested lines to try to see if somehow she connects to the American people. But when you look at, for example, the speeches that she's given in Wall Street, I mean, you've seen the fact that she says she has struggles to connect with the middle class because obviously her and Bill live in a just a different type of way. And so I think Clinton has struggled with authenticity. I think that because of the fact she comes across so scripted, if it wasn't for all of Donald Trump's flaws, I think it's why people, for the most part, don't like her.
Yeah, I mean, look, they don't like her. They've looked for any reason, frankly, Leslie,
that's right,
to not have to vote for her. And yet, you look at the polls and they're not in his favor right now. Florida, for example, he's going to be campaigning there any minute. What is it that's working for her in Florida that he needs to try and capitalize on?
I think what's working for her in Florida, most battleground states across the board with the Electoral College, is that she is speaking more about issues. Look, Donald Trump was giving a fairly decent Gettysburg Address, if you will, a Trump Gettysburg Address. Mm-hmm. And then what he does is he opens mouth and opens mouth and inserts a foot. And he does this time and time again. In a sense, Donald gets in his own way. Donald, in a sense, has been, I think, his own worst enemy. And I think Hillary trying to remain on the issues, as we just heard in her speech in New Hampshire, I think that's one of the reasons that she's leading so much in the polls. And people may not like her, but they dislike him more.
They dislike him more. I mean, isn't it a sad state, though, when that's really what it's coming down to?
Yeah, it really
is. How does that... When people go to the voting booths, though, and Mercedes, I'd like to get your perspective on this, because I talk to a lot of people that, when you dig down, they actually sort of secretly are supporting him. They don't want to say it, though. And when you ask them why, it's because they do support him on the issues. They think economically his program is more sound than hers. Less regulation, lower taxes is what the economy needs. Now, they may not like how it's all dressed up with the bow on top, but they feel that policy-wise he is best. Do you think there's something to this in that people will not admit in these polls, and they won't admit to who they're actually voting for because they've been shamed into not doing so?
Well, I have to say, I think the Democrats have been very effective in trying to point the finger and try to call any of Trump's supporters, besides calling them deplorable, but calling them extreme. And so I think it really does make the Trump supporters, a bit more shy, or those people that are on the fence. With that being said, I find it fascinating just traveling in let's say, Northern Virginia, for instance, a battleground state. Yeah. You barely see signs. You don't see Clinton signs. You don't see Trump signs. There is this silence.
So
there's a sense of saying, I don't know if I like either candidate, but
people just don't quite want to talk.
They don't want to talk about it.
Let me tell you what he's saying. Okay, he's out there in Florida today, and he's talking about these polls really being phony. Here he is. Watch.
Some great polls have just come out. I believe we're actually winning. Now, the press, I believe we're actually winning. If you read the New York Times and if you read some of these phony papers, these are phony, disgusting, dishonest papers. But if you read this stuff, it's like, what are we doing? What are we wasting time for? The truth is, I think we're winning.
All right, and yet, you get the ABC poll out, which shows her actually 12 points ahead right now. And yet, Leslie, I got to say, some of these have been all over the place. How much stock do you put in them?
Well, after the primary, when we saw not just between Hillary and Bernie, but also between Donald and all the other people on that platform, we've seen a lot of errors that came out from the polls. And I would have to say, I'm not putting the biggest stock in the polls, but I am looking at the numerical analysis that is out
Electoral
there, state by
college,
state,
right?
for the Electoral College. And
Florida,
with that,
and it's
it's
tough.
a very, very
It's a
hard,
tough
very, very hard way for him to get to the White House.
So you bring up a very important point. Mercedes, he's got 15 days to go. Which states would you be telling him spend the most time in now?
Donald Trump needs to move into Mar-a-Lago and spend as much time as he can in Florida, as much time as he can in North Carolina and Nevada. Those are going to be critical states for him. I'm looking at Florida very, very closely because that's the one state, as we know, and usually in presidential elections, that will be incredibly important. If Clinton wins Florida, it is over.
Well, very, very interesting. I'm going to talk to you guys in a little bit, so don't go anywhere. Thank you so much, Mercedes and Leslie.